Hey guys, what is up? It's Biff, and you're here at Fearless Mods for another episode with the 2019 Kia Stinger GTS. Hope you enjoyed the reveal. Now it's time to get down and dirty just a little bit and start to dig into some of this damage and see what we've got to do. Already started trying in the last episode to remove that front left wheel. Had issues with it since I don't have the locking key. First, on this one, I'm going to try a method that a young kid at O'Reilly told me that he learned from his dad. I love the shade tree mechanic ways of doing things, and so I'm going to give that a shot on this. This locking lug nut is a little bit boogered up because I did try using a punch to hammer it and try to get it to loosen, which it would not do. It was only chipping away at some of the bits of metal, which I took to mean that it was aluminum. But then whenever I put a magnet on it, it seemed like it was trying to attract to it. It was probably really just attracting to the lug bolt itself, but it seemed like it was attracting to the lug nut. So I tried to weld a socket on the end of it so I could break it loose that way. The socket would not weld to it, so now we're even more boogered up. So when I went to O'Reilly's, the young man there was telling me that his dad's method was to take a cheap socket, drive it down over it, and then use that to break it loose. So I grabbed a couple sockets, 15/16 slides over the whole thing, so that won't do it. But this 7/8 feels like it will be able to be hammered over it pretty easily and start to shape the outer part of this aluminum lug a little bit more like the 6-point socket that I have. And with the bevels on the inside edge of that, that should allow it to kind of like almost crimp down to form into this shape. That baby's on there. And there we go. That technique worked pretty sweet. You could possibly try to get in here with a punch of some sort and try to get that to come out. That's why the guy at O'Reilly said to get a cheap socket, because essentially you're going to need 4 of them and you just dispose of them afterwards with the lug nut still in it. Alright guys, we got the wheel off, so now let's go ahead and start pulling apart some body panels and see what we got underneath here. This is pretty cool at first look. It's just a lot of broken plastic and pieces, but I'm pretty happy with what I'm seeing, so let me walk you through it here real quick. We've obviously got some busted up plastic here a little bit behind the grill, a couple little pieces down here on the intercooler, but the intercooler itself doesn't appear to be broken, just needs to be set up in its mounting a little better. Maybe a little bent bracket here, raise that up to tighten this back up, but bash bar is barely even touched. The fender support is pushed in pretty good. So, but as I said before, the frame rail itself comes in nice and straight. So it'd be a matter of drilling out all these spot welds and this piece here, up here, as well as the upper radiator support. No big deal there. This stuff here behind the fender all looks nice and structurally sound. Obviously it's bent here forward where the tire got back into it, but everything else here appears very straight, flat, undamaged. We won't have to go back in here like we did on the STI. In fact, coming forward, nice and straight all the way up into here, with the exception of the end here bent down a little bit. So, but I think even up to this spot weld, it looks pretty good. So when we get all this drilled out and take this apart, as we slowly go into it, what we'll do is we'll have this side taken apart as well as a comparison, because there's no damage over there, and we can get some really good ideas and measurements of where we need to go. A couple little areas that will need a little tweaking that would stay here are the brackets here for the fender are a little bit tweaked where it got pushed back, so we'll straighten them up using the other side as our reference. Some of the covers here got pushed and pulled out, and obviously these wires. So we'll just put these plugs back in place and bend this back a little bit. But the main thing here is just these are all these brake lines. So we'll probably do a full replacement of this because everything's bent pretty good, including the bracket, since that tire got shoved back in there so hard. My rear suspension point looks good and straight there. This front one here, if you can see it, that part is bent that way just a little bit, so we'll probably have to straighten that up when we put our new forward link in. The strut was pushed back, but it just flexed up there, didn't do anything to the top of the strut tower. In fact, I'll probably just leave that strut in there initially just to get it back to a roller, so that we can go in there later and put some coilovers in. No need to buy a strut if I'm just going to replace it. And I may still be able to save this side skirt, so I'm pretty pleased with that. So the plan moving forward here is just going to be to continue to unbolt things and work our way in here and see what the extent is of the damage underneath that cold air intake, see how anything in there appears to be damaged. But like I said, the strut tower looks good. In fact, the piece of body in here in front of the strut tower even looks straight, so I'm thinking everything's on the outside of that. So super fortunate here on what we have going forward. So last thing I'm gonna do right here, I'm gonna go ahead and cut this off so that when I get a replacement wheel and the suspension there, I can go ahead and not have this digging down into the tire. So last thing for today. I think I need a new blade. So I did some checking on the locking lugs, and the place that I went to, they have locking lugs, but not the OEM ones. It's just aftermarket ones, so they couldn't get me anything for this particular one. I've tried driving this thing off and had no luck in doing it, which is why the guy said to buy a cheap socket. So I've got 2 more of these sockets. I'll need to get a third, and we're gonna go ahead and drive them on here and at least get the other locking lugs off of the other 3 wheels. And you can hear the tone change when it gets bottomed out. And we'll just take this like this. Now that we've shown you how to get the locking lugs off, now I'm going to move on to a little more tear down here. I just want to continue moving on. I've looked at some of the pieces parts here, and like this plastic part here, seems like I could just replace a piece of it right here, but it runs the entire width. So it's like a over $300 piece that runs the entire width, so I got to take all this off. And I'm going to need a replacement of this and this other shroud down here. But we'll just work our way into this and start to expose which parts of the body here we're going to need to be able to drill out. I looked at the Kia parts site, at least one of them, and it pretty much has this whole fender, this whole inner fender structure as one unit. And that's disappointing because I don't need that whole unit. I don't need to spend another $300 on that. I just need this upper radiator support and the frame rail piece right here and the front mounting support. So if I can't get these separately from Kia, I may have to look at trying to get a salvaged one and get that whole piece that's cut off of it for hopefully cheaper, and then just spot drill those pieces out of it and use those off of a donor car. I did notice when I'm getting into here, you can see that this bolt here slid just a little bit, evidence that this bracket pushed back slightly that way. I don't think that that's necessarily indicative of this getting shoved back permanently by what looks like it could be like a 1/16 of an inch or 3/32, but certainly the impact could have pushed it and then allowed it to kind of come back to shape. So I may just break this bolt loose and see if it comes back to where it was underneath there with this bracket. So sure enough, I just loosened that and it popped right back into place, which means that there was just, you know, the force of the impact shoved it back, but then it just, no permanent damage there. It just wanted to come right back into place, but the bolt was holding it back. Starting to tear away on this, getting, you know, all the bolts out here, trying to get everything done so that we can get that whole structure out from behind there. So the next thing I gotta do is just pull this top cap off. Like I was saying before, none of this is crinkled up here at all. There are no bends in any of this. This is in perfect shape, as is this surface down here. All of our bending took place on this outer fender support rail. So if I could just clear this seam sealer here all the way down and get all the spot welds out, I would be able to replace both this piece here as well as this upper radiator support, and I would be good to go. This is a little bit bigger of a challenge. It can be done, but I'm not sure it needs to, since it's lined up with the frame, which obviously looks very straight. What I might end up doing is just bending this back out to flush, since it is steel. Maybe heat it up and see what we can do. I don't know, there's some pretty good bends in there, but as we drill out the spot welds for this and then bend this out, it should be fairly easy to do and get back to where it should be and see what we need to replace on the back side of it. The damage is very localized to right here, plus where the wheel was jammed back and some of those brake lines right there, which obviously aren't leaking. So it will be something that we need to investigate, but my inclination is to go ahead and replace all of those. All right, so that's probably about all we're going to get to for this week. In the next episode, I know I do have the lower suspension coming. I'm trying to locate another wheel. That one's not repairable. So suspension, wheel, gets us back to rolling and quasi-driving. Obviously, the whole front end is gone right now, so need to look into the possibility of sourcing some of this metal right here, structurally, that we talked about, from a donor car perhaps, to see if we can get that drilled out and welded back in without having to buy the entire inner structure, just so that we can get these pieces of metal off of it. As we tear into it next time, it might become evident that that's just what we need to do so that we can have good metal all the way back, and good straight points from which to start. But we'll tackle that as we get to it and as I do a little further research. But for now, again, everything's looking really good. Making some good progress, finding out some good things. Headlight's going to be an important one. I need to find out from the dealer if this one has the dynamic bending. So obviously LED lights have auto leveling, but I don't know if these bend into the turn or not. And that's about $100 difference on the top end of what you end up buying for those headlights. So that's where we are right now for this week. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to reach down there, like and subscribe, and come back and check us out again in the next episode. We'll catch you again later. Take care.